for music, art, whatever. Do you see Avalanche as continuing to support that type of cultural usage for NFTs?
Sure. So thanks. First, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. It really is an honor. I'm a big fan of your work. So as they mentioned, my name is Gabriel Cardona, and I am a developer evangelist and senior test engineer from Avalabs. So I maintain some of our developer tooling like Avalanche.js and Avax, and then I do a lot of developer advocacy and partner integration. A couple of things I wanted to touch on really quickly before I reply to you. So I know that you opened up the conversation saying that you were going to address a bug that went out yesterday. I just wanted to say, to me, that is incredibly encouraging. So this is kind of a message to people who do not work, in the software industry every single day. The nature of the systems that we build are such that there will always be bugs in software. The software code bases that we deal with are just absolutely huge. If you include all of the different dependencies, we're talking about millions of lines of code, really too much for certainly one individual, but oftentimes too much for even a team to wrap your mind around all of the different edge cases. It's one of the reasons open source is so important, simply because the scales of these systems that we're dealing with are so huge. It really just helps if you can leverage the crowd. And, Linus Torvalds famously said, many eyes make all bugs shallow. And so to me, I just wanted to give props to the team and say, to me, it's not about whether or not there are bugs in software. There will always be bugs in software. To me, it's about how a team responds, and if they're super proactive about it, and if they take responsibility, and if they immediately address the crowd and push out a fix. And it seems to me like you guys have just checked off all the boxes. So I just wanted to be encouraging to your team and say nice work. And I wanted to just put that out there to anybody who doesn't do this every day. To take away from this is simply that the Husky team took ownership and that they busted their butt to make things right, like as soon as it was known. So just props and respect to you guys. So back on track regarding NFTs. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of NFTs. I believe that NFTs will ultimately be as transformative as cryptocurrencies. So you can kind of, in your mind, if you need to distinguish between, what is a cryptocurrency, what is an NFT? Well, really, if you're talking about tokenizing everything, and I'm a big believer that there's this convergence of the analog and the digital, and we're witnessing it in our lives. And that's one of the reasons that you brought up Kalau. Kalau is very interesting because it's, virtual and augmented reality along with NFTs. So it kind of really speaks to this convergence of the analog and the digital. And so if you sort of think about, if you're going to tokenize every single thing around you, so for example, like look around your office right now or wherever you are and say, okay, we're going to turn this the physical space I'm in right now, we're going to make it into a virtual world, and we're going to tokenize every single thing that's around us. And of course, fundamentally, tokens are very important because they allow us to take all of the properties that we love about the blockchain, decentralized, peer-to-peer, trustless, and they allow us to apply those properties to, real world and virtual goods. And so if you were to tokenize every single thing that was in your office, for example, nearly everything in your office would be an NFT. Even if you happen to have, a jar of change around and perhaps you have a big stack of cash in your wallet or something, even then, the amount of actual currency that's probably around you is going to be a lot less than the amount of, non-fungible tokens which would be around you. So I'm a huge believer that NFTs are ultimately going to be absolutely transformative. As you mentioned, in the short term, there is a boom around sort of images, and it's also starting to bleed over into other media like video and music. Primarily, it's been around, GIFs and images, JPEGs. And so I believe that some people kind of think that that's the end game, and it's really not. I think everybody on this call, of course, knows, or hopefully they know that no, this is just the very beginning. And what we're witnessing is we're kind of experiencing that .com boom of NFTs in the same way we had a .com boom with the web, and then we had Web 2.0 when it matured, and then we've also had ICOs, and then now we've had a maturing of tokenomics. We're just witnessing the same thing with NFTs, and ultimately NFTs are going to grow into, real estate and proof of ownership, legal documents, driver's license, notary publics, criminal records, etc. You can do supply chain and regulatory compliance, gaming, DAOs, media, medicine. There's so many fields that NFTs are going to ultimately touch and have an impact on. So to sort of directly answer your question, our intention is for Avalanche to be the premier platform for launching NFTs. both licensed. So, if you happen to have the intellectual property for a really rock solid brand, or if you're just launching something totally new, and we want to encourage people to innovate around that. So yes, I do anticipate that Avalanche is going to continue to be a great platform for developing and innovating on NFTs. And I'm really a big fan of what you guys are doing. And I suspect that we're really just in chapter 1 out of a great story that has yet to be told.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your kind words too. We're going to address a lot of community concerns in the second half about the mint, but we appreciate those words. We've been trying to get as much information out as we can, but as you know, we don't want to say anything that we're not 100% on yet, because who knows what can change. Going off what you said about NFTs, yeah, the tokenization of everything, that is, I think that's way down the road. I can see it in shipping chains and lots of transportation using NFTs for authentication of shipments and the like. But we're focusing kind of more on the immediate future. We believe that NFTs are going to be a huge part in the authentication of collectibles, such as art, music, and fashion. Do you think there are what major hurdles do you see kind of moving ahead with the adoption of NFTs, maybe in the fashion world, where instead of a major designer producing a limited run of items just by themselves, they also produce them with NFTs to verify their authenticity?
Yeah, so I think the big barrier to entries are probably going to be mostly social, because I think the technology is really coming together and it's maturing very quickly. I've often compared Avalanche consensus to the Web 2.0 moment of the blockchain. And again, to unpack that slightly, the web had the .com era around 99, 98, 2000. A lot of people in the industry, academics, professionals, computer science, hackers, they all appreciate, entrepreneurs, they kind of appreciated that the web was going to be transformative and it was going to change everything. A ton of money rushed in 98, 99. We had the .com boom. A lot of people used the technology and realized it wasn't mature. A lot of the money rushed out. The bubble popped. Then around 2004, 2005, with the advent of AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, and then CSS and modern JavaScript, the web really had a coming of age moment, and we have Web 2.0. And that's really the explosion of many of the huge brands trace theirs back to that time. And so I've compared Avalanche consensus to that coming of age moment where the blockchain is really maturing in such a way that we can finally have the blockchain can actually live up to its full potential. And so knowing that the technology is now maturing, now it kind of becomes a social thing. So first off, we just have to get people aware of what NFTs are. We have to build out the wallets and the back ends and the front ends and the user experiences that make it all slick. There's also a little bit of regulatory compliance that comes into place. So, I've helped build the TOPS NFT platform, which has recently went live on Avalanche, and we've had a MLB and Bundesliga and Bazooka Joe. And one of the big things we wanted to do is merge Web 2 and Web 3. So currently today, if you want to play around with Web 3 stuff, you've got to have crypto. And in order to have crypto, you've got to link your bank account to some exchange like Coinbase or something, and likely go through some KYC AML unless you have some other way to get a hold of crypto. And so the time usually on most Web3 dApps, from the time you want to interact with something to the time you're actually able to do it, unless you have crypto in your wallet, it could be even potentially weeks sometimes it takes to buy crypto on Coinbase and get it into your wallet. And so number one, just how can we completely remove that barrier to entry? How can we allow people just to immediately go to a website, click buy, and they automatically have an NFT that they're available to play with in their wallet? How can we get people to understand, potential tax implications, capital gains tax and that kind of thing? How can we leverage the hype? So, in all of 2020, the entire NFT market was, I believe, $250 million. In the first quarter of 2021, the entire NFT market was over $1 billion. So it's obvious that we're undergoing an absolute explosion in the adoption of NFT from the retail perspective. So how can we leverage that hype, but how can we also get around that hype so that we don't have to spend a lot of our time just stuck in the hype mode and we can actually go straight to value? And so sort of to bring it back into focus on your question, I think the big barriers to entry right now are just going to be social. How can we get people to understand the technology? How can we build out the user experiences, back ends, front ends, mobile apps, desktop apps, etc., to leverage this technology? How can we have people be aware of tax implications, legal regulatory compliance? How can we cut down on the amount of time that it takes somebody to, ultimately on-ramp into the crypto ecosystem and get an NFT in their wallet? Those to me seem like the biggest barriers to entry.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, coming especially from as Avalanche isn't on Coinbase right now. That is a major jumping off point for a lot of people who aren't too familiar with crypto. So getting that information into people's hands and in a way that's easily digestible as well for people who don't understand kind of what's going on, I think I agree with you, is an incredibly important part before we can really see the more mainstream adoption. But on a more micro level, what we're trying to accomplish at Husky is a way for artists, musicians, fashion designers to kind of have a platform to easily get products on a small scale directly to their fans. Kind of touching on what you said about Topps, that was an incredibly successful launch. I missed out on it completely, and I'm kicking myself. I didn't think it'd go as quick as it did. That was incredible. Are there what kind of other mainstream avenues is Avalanche kind of looking at to get the NFT adoption more out into a mainstream public consumer market?
So we have an absolutely amazing business development team. It's one of the things that Avalabs is doing really well. So to kind of zoom out a little bit, I have been saying for years, and this is a tired cliche, so I apologize in advance, but I've been saying for years that, the next big startup, the next Google, the next Facebook, the next Apple is going to emerge from the blockchain space. I have believed that for years. And that's simply because I think we all appreciate that the blockchain has the potential to be as meaningful as the web and beyond. The blockchain could be the new desktop. It could be the new mobile device. It could be the new web. And I think now, especially in this last market where everything is exploding, we're really starting to see the blockchain just kind of went mainstream over the last year. And so I, for years, have been looking for this next big startup to emerge from the blockchain space. For a while, I thought it might be Coinbase. For a while, I thought it might be Bitmain. And I still think it might be those guys. But I believe that Avalabs has the potential to be the next big startup. Of course, we're humans and we could screw this up and there's no guarantees. But one of the reasons I believe that there's so many reasons I believe we have the potential, but one of them is our business development team. We just have an absolutely ridiculously amazing business development team, and they're going out there and they're sealing the deals with these huge traditional brands and helping hold their hand and on-ramp them into crypto. And so one of our goals is we want Avalanche to be the premier platform for launching licensed NFTs. And so, we're already winning with regards to user experience because Avalanche Consensus is a radical breakthrough, and we get sub-second immutable and irreversible finality. So there is no waiting, even for 15 seconds or something, to get an Ethereum block. There is no such thing as a reorg attack. So once your transaction settles, and literally about the length of a blink of a human eye, you do not have to worry about your transaction being reorged out from under you. That's not even a concept which exists for us. So we're already winning with the user experience. Now what we need is these brands. So we need Avalanche to become the premier platform for launching licensed NFTs. And so that's one of the reasons this Topps deal has been such a great win for us, because they have so many different assets under their brand. Like I said, we've already seen it with MLB and Bundesliga and Bazooka Joe, and there's more on the horizon, as you might imagine. And then also, using the success of this particular pilot program to ultimately attract other huge licensed deals. And so you can imagine just all of the different types of great licensing there is out there, from different movies to different, games to different comic kind of characters, to just all across the board. There's so many good licenses out there, and we're trying to attract them. So for us right now at the macro scale, in the big play, we're trying to attract, big existing brands that are looking to make a move into the new Web3 NFT space. and they're looking for a company which has the technical ability to do it, and at the same time able to allocate, a biz dev team and a project management team and an engineering team that can actually hold their hand and help explain them how this technology works and how it integrates. But on the complete flip side of that, because it's an entire spectrum, one end of the spectrum you have huge brands like Topps and MLB and Bundesliga, and at the other end of the spectrum you have the long tail of independent artists. And whenever you look at kind of a power law distribution, you can have the top, let's say, 5 or less players in the ecosystem. Obviously, they have a huge amount of volume. But then if you look at the long tail, oftentimes, the long tail that stretches out forever, all of the artists that are just selling 1 or 2 copies of their product each, if you add all those up, if you sum them up, they can actually be an aggregate greater than the fat head of the long tail. So there's 2 different ways you can play it. Do we want to focus on the fat head, where we only care about, the top 5 or less players, and because they make up so much volume? Or do we want to focus on the long tail, all these thousands and thousands and millions of mom and pop artists who are just selling 1 or 2? And both of them can be incredibly successful. And you see them with, like, CD Baby is a great example of one of the markets that targeted the long tail of mom and pop artists and did incredibly well in the past. And so I think for us, we want to do both. We want to attract the fat head, like all the very, very big players who have existing licenses that are just looking for somebody to help hold their hand and on-ramp them into the ecosystem. And then we want to do something like what you're doing. We want to target the mom and pop creators out there, the people who are only selling a handful of or less of their items, but when you aggregate them all together, it ends up being more than the fat head. And so for that, we really just need incredibly great technology. We need a best-in-class user experience, and we need a suite of APIs and developer tooling that makes it easy for developers to enter our ecosystem and create these game-changing dApps.
Yeah, that's we agree more. We'll let you guys handle the head. We'll take care of the tail for now. One of the big aspects, kind of on our more immediate roadmap at Husky is our community, building our community aspect and allowing a platform for community artists to sell and promote their NFTs through Husky. Kind of going back to the major kind of the big head argument, do you think, that recently the NFL barred its teams from launching NFT collections? Do you think this is just a knee-jerk reaction to them not having a clue how to do it right? Or do you see them kind of walking back this later on?
You broke up in the first part of the question. What did MLB do, or what did NFL do?
The NFL recently barred its teams from launching NFT collections.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that happened. Wow.
But again, I think I think what you're saying, kind of what you touched on earlier, just the lack of information in the mainstream, I think, is what caused this. And I watched John's interview today on CNBC, and the lack of information in the mainstream was very present in that poor anchor asking him questions. I think. Do you think that these knee-jerk reactions are going to phase out less and less as more people are made more aware of just what is possible within the market space?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. And by the way, just massive props to John Woo, who is one of our C-level executives, absolute champion.
He did God's work during that interview.
Yeah, he's amazing. It's one of our C-level executives are one of the reasons, again, that I believe Avalabs has the potential to be that next big startup, just because starting at the top of our food chain and all the way down the org chart, we've got such amazing players, and John is definitely one of those people. But to answer your question, yeah, what I suspect is happening, obviously I didn't even know about that until this moment, so I have no insider info, but what I suspect is happening is that things are moving very quickly. There's a lot of new technology, a lot of new acronyms. DeFi is just, a crazy amount of new acronyms, and people were already kind of like, didn't totally understand cryptocurrency. And then now all of a sudden there's this NFT thing where if you're not digging 2 or 3 layers deep, it would be easy just to see it as people paying tons of money for JPEGs. And if you don't kind of get digital scarcity, and if you don't understand the potential future of the blockchain and all of this stuff, it might seem nonsensical. It might seem scammy. But what I suspect is happening is that things are moving very quickly. And as an organization, the NFL is probably trying to have some marching orders for everybody so that not everybody just starts doing their own little thing, because the few that do it and do it right, it's going to be incredibly successful for them. And it's going to open up like a huge amount of new revenue. And I'm sure the NFL, the bosses and the, the upper offices, they just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, marching to the same rhythm, and that there's some kind of systemic plan in place, because this is obviously going to be so huge. And with things like the NFT Tops platform, and there's so many other ones across other blockchains, I suspect they're probably just trying to have a systemic marching order and plan.
Yeah, and I also see, with the NCAA recently allowing their athletes to sell name and image likeness rights, I also see that as a potential avenue for some of those student athletes to capitalize on their name and image somehow in the NFT market space. I mean, can you imagine, some...
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
there's a lag. I apologize. I don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to weigh in on, I think you're touching on something very important there. So if anybody follows the UFC, you know that traditionally they're, the UFC fighters, Ultimate Fighting Champion, for anybody who's not aware of it, mixed martial arts. There's several sort of universal complaints. Number one, they complain about fighter pay, that, Dana White and the UFC doesn't pay them enough. I can't speak to that. I'm not in that industry, but it's definitely a common complaint. And then I know the fighters used to be able to have their own sponsors where they would, put a logo on their pants or on their shoe or something like that. And then a few years ago, the UFC signed a marketing deal with Reebok, if I remember correctly. And that basically removed the ability of these athletes to have, third-party sponsorships, and it removed a big stream of income. And of course, there were a lot of people who complained about that. Just recently, the UFC signed, I want to say, like a 10-year, $250 million deal. Somebody out there fact check me on that one, but it was multi-year and it was a lot of money. They signed a deal, the UFC signed a deal with Crypto.com, which to me was incredibly encouraging. And what I hope to see, and I think, again, it's probably that things are moving very quickly and they're just wrapping their minds around it in the upper offices, what's available. But what I would like to see, and it plays to what you just said with the NAACP, it would be nice if these athletes were able to have some type of QR code or something next to their name, an address basically next to their name whenever they get shown on the screen, so that they could accept tips from outside. So you can imagine that if you're a UFC fighter and you are no longer able to have a sponsorship with Tap Out or whoever, because now the UFC makes everybody wear the Reebok gear, that you would then be able to supplement some income by having a crypto, address. And so that anybody out there, whenever they see you on stage or on the screen, they can send you some type of crypto. And I hope it's the same thing for sports. So that's what I would like to see, is that people are able to leverage this technology to, tip people, which could be a huge stream of income.
Yeah, and a tip, you receive maybe a unique NFT, from that particular athlete. My thinking with the college student athletes, a lot of them, they might be relative unknowns until they make it to the pros, and those NFTs could be incredibly valuable one day. Kind of going, keeping with sports and going back to the tops, trading cards, the physical trading card market has been blowing up in the last couple of years as well. Do you see the physical and NFT market for those trading cards competing, or is coexistence possible?
I think that ultimately there will be coexistence, but I think crypto just always has the edge, right? So I think recently my son, I have a 12-year-old son, and he was telling me he recently saw, I forget it was some type of YouTuber that basically got ripped off in a big Pokemon deal. So, they bought like decks and decks of these, they're supposed to be rare Pokemon cards, and somehow they got ripped off. I don't know the details, but we all know counterfeiting is a thing.
Yep.
And so that's one of the amazing things that, crypto brings to the table, is that you can't really counterfeit these NFTs. And then the NFTs can be used for things like concert tickets. So there will be same thing we're doing with the Tops market. So, there's a buy directly from Tops, and then there's a reseller market. And so one of the places where I expect NFTs to really, really shine but it's a few years out because we just haven't had the impact from a societal level, which we will, is with 3D printing. So 3D printing is absolutely transformative. And we're still in the very, very nascent early stage of this. You either have like industrial kind of 3D printers, or you have these desktop 3D printers that do 1 or 2 colors of plastic. But, in the 10, 20, 30 year time span, 3D printers are going to be absolutely transformative, and they're going to be completely ubiquitous. And so that's where I think that there will be a cooperation, and that they'll live in unison, the traditional, actual cards and the NFTs, because you can imagine 3D printers that are able to print, basically they can print anything, but you would be able to restrict on what could actually be printed, whether or not a person had access to an NFT. So you could actually go out and print your card, but only you could do it because only you could sign a transaction proving that you actually owned that NFT. So I believe that they'll live in unison. It's one of the things I think that Husky is doing so well. So this might be an oversimplification, and I apologize if it is. I don't want to box you guys into a corner because I know you're doing amazing work. But one of the ways I perceive what Husky is doing is it's like they're giving me a receipt, right? So whenever I get this nice gear in a physical hoodie or a hat, I also get an NFT with it. And that NFT really serves the purpose of being like a receipt. And so, we all have gotten so many receipts in our lives that I think we're kind of numb to them. And I think we just rip them up and throw them away unless there's something important enough to stick around for taxes. But NFTs are very important, receipts are very important, right? They're like a little legal document. Basically, even if you go buy a Starbucks or something, you get this legal document that shows the timestamp, the amount, and all of that stuff. Obviously, that needs to be transformed over into a blockchain asset, NFTs being the one. And so I think that one of the ways that traditional collectibles and NFTs will work hand in hand is that there is still going to be the desire to have a real world item, but being able to then tokenize it and issue it on the blockchain and have some type of digital asset that maps to that real world item is just an absolute win. And so I imagine that they will play together friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if that receipt is really cool. It looks a lot better than a regular paper receipt.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and that is our goal. We want to, the items we're producing with those NFTs, that NFT is to, verify and also ensure the future resale of that item. It's authentic, it's legitimate, and it's the only one made. So
it's the provenance, right? It's the provenance, basically. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Sorry about that. We do have some quick questions for you gathered from our community, kind of more about Avalanche. If you wanted to go a few minutes on that,
sure.
What on the Avalanche roadmap are you most excited about?
Oh man, that is such a good question.
I know, gotta pick one.
Can I only pick one? Okay, so I think
whatever you like.
Yeah, I think there's a couple big ones. So governance, of course, governance is coming very soon. I think really for Avalanche to fulfill its promise, we need to have Avalabs and the Avalanche Foundation sort of step back from being such a primary driver of the ecosystem and ultimately, on-ramp more stakeholders in the form of governance. And that's on our roadmap. It's something we're very passionate about. It's coming very soon. So for us to really become a DAO, for the Avalanche network to really grow and fulfill its destiny, we need governance, and that's on the roadmap. I also think a mobile app is very exciting, a browser extension, so something that can compete against MetaMask, but which is centric to our particular tech stack. The Blueberry network upgrade that is coming. So we're going to have cross subnet transfers and permissionless subnets. So, we've talked in the past about having like a Bitcoin Cash and a Bitcoin virtual machine and subnet. And that has actually been worked on. The reason that we haven't gone live with it yet is because we need permissionless subnets and cross-chain cross-subnet transfers. So today, if you fire up a virtual machine in a subnet as a validator, you have to whitelist the virtual machine, and then the subnet has to whitelist. You have to whitelist the subnet, I should say, and the subnet has to whitelist your validator node ID. That's going to be changing in the Blueberry network upgrades. So we'll be able to actually have a Bitcoin Cash subnet with a virtual machine, and validators will be able to join and leave. I also think identity is huge. I'm a big believer in the convergence of the digital and the physical. And one of the things that's really missing is this idea of identity. And I still just think NFTs are absolutely transformative. Again, in the same way the cryptocurrencies have been transformative, I think NFTs could potentially even be more so. So governance, a mobile app, or browser extension. Another one is initial litigation offerings. So, the litigation market is about a $10 billion a year industry. Today, it's very expensive. And for a person to actually get litigation, to go through the entire process, it takes time, it takes money. Being able to tokenize that process and raise capital in advance with the guarantee that whoever ultimately helped fund it and has tokenization ownership over that will be rewarded based upon the outcome of the litigation, I think is going to be incredibly huge. So those are some that immediately come to mind.
Yeah, and it sounds like, the mobile app, the browser extension, that ties in very well with what you're saying earlier about Avalanche as a platform getting out into the general public, getting that information out there, because those are two kind of walls that a lot of non-crypto familiar people, it's tough for them to climb. So having those tools at their fingertips will only make adoption that much easier. Other than DEXs and gaming platforms, what other types of dApps do you see thriving on Avalanche?
Yeah, so I think the Internet of Things is something that is going to be incredibly transformative, and we're right at the convergence of, the Internet of Things is maturing. Another thing is artificial general intelligence, which I'm a big believer in. I think that even if we don't understand how the brain works, we'll be able to ultimately just brute force it, and it'll be close enough, because we don't even know how our brain works, but we know it does work, right? So I think we'll be able to create some AGI, which is ultimately close enough. So I think there's this big convergence of robotics, Internet of Things, artificial general intelligence, and the blockchain. And I think they're all going to play really well together. I think identity is huge. As I mentioned, there's this convergence of the analog and the digital. And so being able to have some representation of yourself. Today, it's very inexpensive to spin up a new identity. All I have to do is spin up new Twitter accounts. All I need is a Gmail. I could ultimately write a script and automate all of this. Pardon me. And once you have these identities, you can then basically Sybil attack the network. And so based on the technology that exists today, it's very easy to spin up a bunch of new handles across whatever social media platform you like. It's very easy to use like deep fakes to generate pictures of people's faces that are generated from basically training an algorithm on billions and billions of actual humans' faces, and it'll just spit out faces that have never been seen before, but they're very, very real. Then you can have chat bots that ultimately are just trained on these huge amounts of text, and you can actually Sybil attack a network by just spinning up a bunch of accounts, having these chat bots speak back and forth, and you ultimately steer the direction of the conversation. And I think that that's incredibly empowering to people who want to misuse it. And I feel like we really need, as a society, to develop an immunity to that type of stuff. And so one of the ways we could do that is, perhaps somebody on this call is familiar with what's known as the web of trust. So imagine this scenario. I'm in Hong Kong and I have $100,000 in Avax and I want to swap it out for some cash. How do I actually do that? Well, there is there's this protocol called the web of trust. So I can say, like, for example, I really trust method 527, and method 527 really trusts this other person. And based on my trust in method 527 and based on their trust in this other person, I'm willing to trust this other person, and I can basically meet up and make this crypto deal go down. And there's a way you can do that today. It's called the web of trust. It's one of the major ways that over-the-counter trading works. And for years, I've been wondering, why is there not a web of trust-like user experience which is tied to all of our social media accounts? It should be expensive, and I don't just mean in a dollar sense. I just mean it should be expensive in some metric for me to spin up a new identity, simply because I've invested so much time into my Gabriel identity that it shouldn't be as easy as me just spinning up 10,000 other ones and Sybil attacking it. So I believe that identity is another thing that could thrive on Avalanche. I think peer-to-peer payments So, Satoshi kicked off this whole movie with a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. In my opinion, the world has never seen digital peer-to-peer payments at full scale. I don't believe that Bitcoin fulfilled that destiny. I don't believe many of the forks like Bitcoin Cash have even come close. That's not a shot towards Bitcoin Cash. I just mean, look at the numbers. We don't have 5 billion people in the world doing 50 on-chain transactions a day or anything like that. What we need is anybody in the world can send any amount of money to anybody, anywhere, basically for free with no middlemen. That's an incredibly powerful vision. It still turns me on as much as it did from the very first time I heard it back in 2011. So I think peer-to-peer payments and Avalanche, we have an API for spinning up blockchains. So as you guys know, part of our value add is we have this thing called subnets, which allow anybody anywhere to spin up a tailor-made network that has, complex validator rule sets and custom virtual machines. And those virtual machines are really the application level logic of your blockchain. And we have two data structures. We have a DAG, a directed acyclic graph, that has Avalanche consensus. And then we have a linear chain, which has Snowman consensus. And we have an API that you can spin up your own DAG or linear chain and then tweak out the custom behavior yourself. And you get all of the networking and consensus and data storage, all of that stuff out of the box. So our directed acyclic graph, which is what our AVM is, our X chain, is really, really good for peer-to-peer payments. You can basically get sub-second finality and super inexpensive fees, and it's got an extendable API with what we call feature extensions. So you can have SecP assets and quantum safe crypto and NFTs and all of this stuff. And so I believe that peer-to-peer payments are something that can and will absolutely thrive on Avalanche. I think gaming, gaming is huge. I grew up as a gamer. Today I have a 12-year-old son. He is a gamer. Just this last year, due to COVID, due in part to COVID, electronic sports for the first time ever past traditional sports with regards to revenue. And that's just the beginning. That's going to accelerate and increase. Imagine playing your favorite game. Let's just say, for example, Zelda Breath of the Wild, although they're not doing crypto. So it's just an example. But imagine playing Zelda and every single item that you touch throughout the game, if you pick up an apple, if you pick up a sword, these are all NFTs that you own in your wallet and that you can then later go to a centralized or a decentralized exchange and trade them. They have actual value. That is huge. That is a one-way door, and I'm sure that the first major league game, so if Zelda did it, if Grand Theft Auto did it, if Fortnite did it, the first tier A game which launches in-game tokenization is going to set off an absolute arms race. I'm just waiting for that to happen. That's going to happen any day. There's several projects which are in the development stage on Avalanche, both from an SDK perspective and from actual large games that are doing the development work right now. I also think regulatory compliance. So we all know that regulatory compliance is coming to the crypto space. What will it look like? We're not entirely sure yet. But one of the strong things about Avalanche is that we have regulatory compliance optionally built into our platform. It's not mandatory. So if you want to create a permissionless network and launch the very next Bitcoin or the very next Ethereum, you can do that on Avalanche. But if you're doing a partner integration with a Wall Street firm or some regulatory compliant play, you can also do that on Avalanche. And so I think regulatory compliance will thrive on Avalanche. And then bridges. I have this placeholder term I've been calling, which is the bridgening. But basically, I believe in a few years when we look back on this particular chapter in the crypto story, one of the big milestones that's happening is just bridges. Obviously, we have multiple bridges today on Avalanche, and then basically any network which has value that can bridge to another network is going to lead to compound network effects, and the value of the network effects will be so strong that it will force people to build bridges, whether they like it or not. So the Internet of Things with the convergence of machine learning and artificial general intelligence and robotics is huge. IoT, peer-to-peer payments, gaming, regulatory compliance, and bridges all come to mind.
So just only a few things, huh?
Just a couple.
Yeah. Speaking of the the X chain, a lot of can you touch briefly on kind of the future interactions between the X and C chain, and is there plans to be able to move NFTs from one to the other?
Yeah, so that is a very common request, and currently it's not on the roadmap to be able to move NFTs between the X and the C chain. And the reason being, the C chain, of course, is an instance of the Ethereum virtual machine, and it has 100% backwards compatibility. So, of course, we have ERC 721 and ERC 1155, which are really the NFTs that most people are familiar with. But then the X chain has its own version of NFTs, which get all of the benefits of this peer-to-peer payments directed acyclic graph. But because the X chain does not have smart contract functionality today, now to zoom out there, the AVM, the Avalanche Virtual Machine, is general enough, and it has this architecture called feature extensions to where you could write a smart contract layer that plugs in as a feature extension. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. You can do other types of signatures. You could have Schnorr signatures or BL signatures. We've already got a prototype working for quantum safe signatures, but we've got it on hold because basically the library that is doing the quantum safe SIGs isn't 100% fully baked yet, and obviously we don't want to roll anything out like that until it's totally baked. But with regards to what we need to do, we've already got a prototype working for quantum safe signatures. But to be a bit more technical, on the Avalanche virtual machine, there are different types of serializations. So we have inputs and outputs, and we also have different transaction types across the different virtual machines. And on the AVM, we have a base transaction, which has a network ID, a blockchain ID, inputs, outputs, and then a memo, and then a signatures and credentials. And we also have a create asset transaction, an operation transaction, an input transaction, and an output transaction. The operation transaction is what's needed to issue, to mint basically SECP 256K1 variable capped assets, as well as minting and transferring NFTs. And so there, at the moment, there's no concept of an operation transaction on the EVM. And so there would have to be some further steps. Either somebody would have to write some type of smart contracting feature extension for the AVM, or the EVM would have to be aware of operation transactions. As it stands today, it's not yet possible to transfer NFTs between the AVM and the EVM. As I mentioned, the AVM is general purpose enough where potentially that could be done in the future, but at the current moment, it's not possible.
Gotcha. And finally, the one last community question. Are there any? We love the implementation of dynamic fees. Is this done, or are you guys going to continue to tinker with this in the future?
Yes, so I think that the bounds, I think it could get cheaper in the future. So I think pretty much right now we have EIP 1559 style dynamic fees, and it was based on the Ethereum implementation. But I believe the final tweaking that we could do to it is we could ultimately make it even cheaper, as far as I understand. And basically what we've been doing is we've just been trying to strike a balance of not moving things too fast and only making the moves when we feel like the network is mature enough. And so, we got a lot of complaints for a long time about dynamic fees, but we didn't feel like the network was ready. We didn't feel like the network was hardened enough. And so, like last year, we committed to a bunch of timelines around the Apricot network upgrades, and we didn't end up meeting those timelines. And we've got a ton of blowback from the community, rightly so or wrongly so. We did commit to a timeline that we didn't hit. And so fair enough. So we're trying to not commit to timelines so much on the Blueberry network upgrade, simply because we don't want to have blowback and we don't want to let people down. But and so we've had some places which have seemed, well, they've been like speed limit signs, really. We've had a couple of speed limits in place across the network, simply while we've hardened the network and while we've got moved away. If you've ever done software development, there's what's called like the naive implementation. And sometimes people think that's an insult, and it's not really an insult. It just means like, hey, this is the first time I ever saw this problem. I got something in place that works. It's not optimal. It's a bit naive. If we were to rethink the problem, now that we've had a little bit of experience in trying to solve it, we could come up with a better implementation. And anybody who's ever done software just knows that's kind of just the way it works. You're always creating higher fidelity prototyping by removing tech debt. And so as we resolve a bunch of tech debt and as we feel more confident that the network is baked in all the places that we want it to be, we feel like we can make dynamic fees even cheaper, ultimately with the intention of, Avalanche being used by everybody on the world for both smart contracts and peer-to-peer payments.
It's good news. Good news. That does it for questions for you directly. We appreciate you coming on. This love talking about NFTs. Love what you guys are doing at Avalabs, and we appreciate all the help and support from you guys, and especially the kind words. And yeah, that's about it for right now for the NFT discussion. So now we are going to move on to the Husky devs and discuss kind of the post-mortem of what happened with the minting of the NFT yesterday. Gabriel, if you need to check out, we completely understand, and we appreciate you being here. But if you want to stick around and listen in, we would appreciate that as well.
Thank you guys. Just real quick, thanks for having me. I am going to stick around. I just want to hear what you guys have to say. So if you guys want to send me a question or something, I'll happily answer, but no pressure. I just want to again say props to your all's team. Really love what you guys are doing. Keep the great work, and I'm happy to chat anytime. So if you guys want to do this in the future again, just let me know. Thank you, gentlemen.
Awesome. We'll hold you to it.
Awesome. Cheers.
All right. Now I am going to turn it over to Bora, the Husky Chief Technology Officer. He is going to quickly give a quick technical rundown of what occurred yesterday. Bora, you ready to go?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So to tell quickly what happened with the minting problem. The first displayed images people saw about the NFT weren't the right ones. Because they were pointing to test data that we forgot to modify. So they were pointing to JSONs we used for testing before, and the real NFT never changed. They were the right ones from the beginning. Like on the C chain, if you watched on the C chain your NFTs, they were the same. From the beginning to the end, and that's it. Sorry if some people had false hopes, but
So the metadata was correct with the minting. The transactions on the C chain, they did not change at all. The issue was just a display issue in the Husky wallet, where the incorrect image was shown and the rarity on that image was associated with that. So once we noticed this and made the corrections, the correct image was then shown, but with the rarity of the correct image. So the NFT never changed from what was actually minted on the metadata and on the C chain. It was just the image displayed in the Husky wallet, correct?
Exactly.
And we're, with the issues with the marketplace currently being down, I know a lot of people really looking forward to that marketplace for the reflections, and I know the dev team we're hard at work at bringing that back online for the Husky community. Do you want to give some quick updates about that?
Yes. So the problem with the marketplace was that was in the reflective function of the smart contract. It wasn't really scalable, so that's why we saw huge fees on the transactions. But we are working on a new version of the marketplace, and we are going to deploy it this Tuesday, 21st of September.
And so the marketplace will be going live next Tuesday, September 21st.
Yes, that's it.
Awesome. What else did you want to discuss in regards to that marketplace going live again?
We are also thinking about some like compensations for the people who hold a Husky NFT, because the marketplace wasn't live when it supposed to be. So we don't know yet what type of compensations, but we are thinking about it.
But in something like an airdrop for people who are holding their Husky NFTs right now.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. I think that about does it for what I was going to cover. Anyone else want to add anything real quick? I'm hearing nothing, so it sounds like we're good to go. So, Gabriel, I just want to say thank you again for coming on here. We appreciate you having you on, and your knowledge of NFTs and Avalanche. That's why we're here. That's why we're on Avalanche. We feel the same way. We think this is definitely the future for a lot of a lot of potential marketplaces.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
To the Husky community, we apologize for the issues that happened with the mint and the marketplace. We are bringing the marketplace back online next Tuesday, September 21st, and we are discussing compensation for those who are holding Husky NFTs. So we don't want to, we understand that the reflection was a big part of why people bought those Husky NFTs, and we want to make sure that the marketplace being down for a week, that's a lot of reflection, potential reflection revenue that people aren't going to see. So we're working to see how we can best compensate everyone for that. Again, thank you to Gabriel for being here. Thank you to all of the Husky devs for being here. Thank you, Bora, for the technical analysis of what happened yesterday. And I think we're going to sign off here, and we appreciate everyone that came to listen today. This AMA will be recorded and will be reposted for anyone who missed out. And thank you all again.